Now I'm dedicating this video to my 20,000 subscribers for showing the love so far. You guys do encourage me to keep on working harder, and if at all you are new to my channel or haven't already subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing to my channel because that encourages me to keep on making more wonderful content just like the one you are about to watch. Okay, yes, we can study all sorts of openings, tricks, gambits, offbeat openings, and sidelines, but we cannot run away from the fact that the king's pawn opening still remains king. Like in the words of Bobby Fischer, it is simply the best opening. Well, that was his opinion, of course, but still that can be supported by the fact that the king's pawn opening is a great opening choice for champions. In point of fact, 90% of you guys were introduced to the world of chess with the king's pawn opening, where you learned about the scholar's mate, and so this is something to master if you really want to have a full understanding of other offbeat openings and gambits. And so this video is more like my e4 bundle intro for beginners, intermediate level players, and also some advanced players. So after pawn to e4, in this introductory video, I'll show you how to continue if black plays pawn to e5, and also how to play against the Sicilian defense, the Caro-Kann defense, and the French defense. I call these the big four. In fact, if you check the master's database, pawn to c5, the Sicilian defense is by far the top played move after e4. Then pawn to e5 is the second most played move, and that's according to the master's database. In the Lichess database, it's the other way around, and pawn to e6 is the third most played move, then followed by pawn to c6, which is the Caro-Kann defense. So these are the most common responses that you will see from your opponents, and so you need to have a very solid and complete repertoire against each of these responses by black. And that's what this introductory video is all about. So I'll try to be very brief and go through the moves very fast. Don't worry, you can always slow down the video if I go very fast. I mean, YouTube has that feature. So here we begin with pawn to e4, and then black responds with pawn to e5. This is called the king's pawn opening. What is my recommendation against the king's pawn opening? Well, here just continue with knight to f3, and after knight c6, hey, there's no one to impress. Go for the Italian game. So just play bishop c4, and this is what I recommend you should be playing. So I'm not gonna waste much of your time because I have made some videos on this opening. The links are in the card above. Feel free to check them out. But to cut the story short, after bishop c4, the top played move by far is bishop c5 by black. Yep, you'll see some of your opponents responding with knight to f6. We're going to look at that also. By the way, bishop c4 is the Italian game. And so after bishop c5 by black, this is now called the gioco piano or the gioco piano, meaning the silent game. Now from here, pawn to c3 is what most masters are playing nowadays. In point of fact, if you're an advanced player, I recommend pawn to c3 right away. And it's good to mention that d4 is not the idea here. We just want to let black play knight f6, attacking our e4 pawn, and then we play pawn to d3, which is known as the gioco pianissimo, a very silent game. Now hold on, don't skip this video because I'm gonna show you something more interesting than this, especially for beginners and intermediate level players. But at the top level, these are the main ideas. Let me explain. From here, pawn to d6 is by far the most sensible and top played move by black. After that, it may even take more than 10 moves to see some trades happening. That's why it is called a very silent game. Anyways, the main goal here is just to put our pieces on the most active squares, e.g. after castling short, we visualize our queen's knight to sit on f5 someday. How we do that depends on black's responses. Otherwise, we don't even have a specific sequence of moves to follow. The dark squared bishop will be the last thing we will develop and probably be exchanged on e3 with black's dark squared bishop that will be taken by our queen's knight. We also visualize our light squared bishop to sit on c2 if attacked someday. And then finally the pawns will move as highlighted following black's responses. But let me show you why this is called a very silent game in case black becomes greedy or loud enough to play pawn to d5 instead of the normal pawn to d6. So after pawn to d5 by black, here we just take the pawn. Knight f5 is bad due to the highlighted moves, and so knight takes d5 seems to be natural. But queen b3 gives white a huge advantage, and it's nothing that black can do to stop us from winning one of these two pawns, the b7 and the f7 pawn. And so if you are an advanced player facing stronger opponents, these are the ideas I recommend. But let me show you something very spicy instead of this boring variation. So after bishop c4, the Italian game, and black plays bishop c5, what I personally like doing, especially in tournaments and in over-the-board games, is just castling short. And here you will see most of your opponents responding with knight f6, the top played move. Now this is still the Gyoko piano. d3 is okay, but I like going pawn to d4 right away. This is called the deuce gambit. I play this all the time in classical games during tournaments, and to be honest with you, I don't remember the last time I lost a game with the deuce gambit. Most beginners and intermediate level players play under the environment of doubt and fear, and they tend to become more nervous under crucial moments like this. My pawn is attacking the bishop. I also want to take on e5, and the guy is confused what to do. Not to mention that in this position, it is difficult for a beginner to play the correct move, which is bishop takes on d4, because they were taught to always keep the bishop pair in the game. And that's another reason why I like playing this line even against advanced players, because it forces them to give up their bishop pair advantage very early in the opening stage. Believe you me, anything else apart from bishop takes on d4 by black will be a sorry move. E.g., e takes d4 is by far the top played move even according to the Lichess database, which is not good because of the trap that I showed you in the video that has popped up in the card above. E.g., if they play knight g4, the standard approach is bishop f4, but I like this move right away. Bishop takes f7, taking away black's right to castle. And after king takes f7, I check with my knight on g5, because next I'm gonna win the knight on g4. And after king g8, I go queen takes g4, just keeping black up on his toes while increasing his chances to blunder. And remember, this is in a classical match. By this time, my lower rated opponent will start playing by fear, because chess is more psychological than physical. Anyways, so after e takes d4, e5, instead of knight g4, knight h5 is equally bad due to the following continuation, where we take on f7 again. And after knight takes f7, we take the other knight, attacking the queen and the rook at the same time. And after king takes, I take the knight on h5 with check, and also indirectly attacking the bishop on c5. The same thing will happen if, let's say, the knight goes back to g8 instead of knight h5, because here we still go knight g5, eyeing the weak f7 pawn. And if knight h6, defending the pawn and also posing a threat to capture our e5 pawn, here we just play rook e1, first of all holding on to our pawn, castle shot by black. Then look at this move, queen d3, intending to checkmate on h7. The pawn on f7 is pinned to the king by the bishop, and so pawn to g6 is forced. Then we play queen h3, and if king g7, defending the knight, we take the knight with our queen, intending to mate on h7. This is check, by the way. King takes h6 is forced. And then we play knight takes f7, that's check, and at the same time attacking the queen on d8 or king g7. We play bishop h6, king g8, and then we win the queen with discovery check by the bishop. I mean, this must be a very good opening for aggressive chess players and those who just wanna have some quick victories in the tournament. Anyways, instead of knight back to g8 or knight h5, black can also try knight e4 here, but this also fails due to the following continuation: queen e2, attacking the knight, d5, we take with ampersand, f5, protecting the knight, and this weakens the ag diagonal. Bishop g5 is what we play, attacking the queen. Queen takes d6, we develop our other knight, and the game can continue as follows, keeping black's king in the middle of the board with no rights to castle. And imagine all this is happening in your over the board game in the tournament. Anyways, going back to this position, after e takes d4, e5, black may also try to play pawn to d5 right away, attacking our bishop. Here we can just go ahead and take the knight. This is a very common line where we give black a check, they block with a bishop, knight g5, attacking the bishop once again, and after queen takes on f6, we take the bishop with our knight, f takes c6, and then queen h5 check, which also wins the bishop immediately. And so when you're playing normal chess, this is what I recommend that you should try out, even in your classical games, not just your blitz games, especially against your lower rated opponents or intermediate level players. Anyway, so we just castled short and black played knight f6, then we play pawn to d4. Well, instead of e takes d4, this time let's say black takes with the knight. Well, here there's a popular trap that begins with knight takes e5, intending to take on f7, and after castle short by black, we play bishop e3. Note that black's knight is attacked twice by our pieces, and so black saves that, but we still take the knight, because after bishop takes on e3, we first of all play an in-between move, bishop takes on f7 with check, and to my surprise, rook takes on f7 is by far the most played move according to the Lichess database, after which we first of all take the rook attacking the queen. So king takes f7 is forced, and then we take the bishop on e3. I mean, can you lose this game? Alright, still in the Italian game, black just played knight c6, and then we play bishop c4. Now instead of bishop c5, you will also see some of your opponents responding with a move knight to f6. Well, if you want to play normal chess again, you can still continue with the ideas of the Giuoco Pianissimo as highlighted, but interestingly enough, you can still go pawn to d4 even in this position. So pawn to d4 must be in your mind. By the way, Magnus Carlsen played this opening against Liam in the FTX Crypto Cup 2022. So d4 is the key move in these lines. If e takes d4, we saw what happens after e5 if black plays any of those highlighted moves, e.g. if they play knight g4. The main line is to go bishop f4, knight d2 at some point, pawn to h3, chasing away this knight from our territory. We castle short, life goes on, and nothing to worry about. But you can still try bishop takes f7, which will take most of your lower rated opponents out of their preparation. Because after king takes f7, they have lost their rights to castle. So knight g5 is what we play again. And if king g8, we don't even take the free knight right away, because we can play queen f3, intending to checkmate on f7. And if knight g takes e5, which is again the top played move in the Lichess database, it's checkmate in 2 after queen d5 check, knight f7 the only move, and knight takes on f7 checkmate. So that's just one possibility. However, after e takes d4 and pawn to e5, instead of going knight g4 or any of those moves, black can play pawn to d5, and here it is not a good idea to take on f6 because the dark squared bishop is not on c5 and we haven't castled short. So this is a bit different from the line that we looked at in the Deuce Gambit. This is called the two knights defense, Scotch Gambit advanced variation, and so you need to switch your plan, play bishop b5, and after knight e4 for example, we just take on d4 with our knight, and bishop d7, again we take the knight on c6, pawn takes, we castle short, bishop c5 attacking our knight, f3, and after knight g5 by black we play f4. The difference here is that we have managed to put our pawn on f4 by taking advantage of this badly placed knight, and the game may continue as follows, where white just fights for the quick development, and look at black's pawns from the queen side, they are badly placed and you should be good to go from here as white. In case of knight takes on d4, unlike what most of the black players do, which is e takes d4, taking with the knight is not a good idea. Because of this simple trick here, bishop takes f7 check, and after king takes f7, we take the pawn with check, and on the next move we win the knight. Even if black plays queen e7, indirectly attacking our pawn on e4, we just play knight d2, cause we know that anyways black wants to play pawn to d6, chasing away our knight, such that after knight d3, yes they can win back their pawn, but after we take back on e4 and queen takes e4 check, bishop e3 seals the deal. It's up to us to decide where we want to castle, either long or short, and our position looks very good. So anyways, enough of the e4, e5 stuff. Now let's look at how to play against the Sicilian defense. Now before I continue, thank you once again guys for subscribing to my channel. We have now reached 20,000 subscribers. This is all possible because of your support. And for those of you who are new to my channel, please consider subscribing to my channel so that we can grow this lovely community together. Leave your comments in the comment section down below. Hit the like button. Don't just watch. By hitting the like button, you're simply saying thank you, Casper, and that encourages me to keep on making more wonderful content just for you guys. Not to mention that I now have a Patreon page where I post other exclusive content, my secret weapons, some well annotated master PGNs like the one that I'm using in this video, and other fun stuff that will keep you entertained outside the chess world. So be sure to follow me on Patreon. The link is in the description down below. And before I forget, the link for my website is in the description down below where you can purchase all my courses at very affordable prices. So be sure to visit my website. Okay, let's get back into the video. Okay, so again, pawn to e4, expecting black to play pawn to e5 so that we can play the Gioco Pianissimo or the Deuce Gambit, but black plays the annoying pawn to c5. Well, these are the ideas that I want to recommend. This is the simple plan. You know, the Sicilian defense is somehow predictable in terms of where black will castle, because it's obvious that black will not castle long. They have already opened up their queen side with pawn to c5, and so it's obvious that they will castle short. And I use these ideas even in classical tournaments. Immediately I see the Sicilian, I start thinking of the early kingside pawn storm, starting with pawn to g4, then h4, g5, etc. So I just gave you one secret of masters. So just remember to start thinking of increasing a lot of pressure on the king side beginning with g4. So here knight f3 makes sense. After pawn to d6, this is called the modern variation. d4, normal stuff, as if you want to play the Yugoslav attack. I mean, this is how we play the Sicilian defense. So right in this position, after we develop our two knights and the pawn, and black has already developed the knight on f6 and the pawn on d6, it is from here where the Sicilian defense can go different ways. For example, pawn to a6 is called the Najaf variation. Knight to c6 is called the classical variation. Pawn to e6 is the Scheveningen variation. Pawn to g6 is called the dragon variation. I hate to disclose this to you. My secret here is just to force black to block his light squared bishop by making him play pawn to e6 so that I can quickly play pawn to g4 and g5. Because I know black will castle short anyways, and if black shows me some signs of not wanting to play pawn to e6 anytime soon, I can still go pawn to h3 and g4 with the same ideas. For example, after pawn to e6 in this position, I don't waste any time but to play pawn to g4. I know they are not going to castle long, so let me just start the pawn storm as quickly as possible from the king side. So h6 is what most of my lower rated opponents play. Then here, even though I can go pawn to h4 to prepare for g5, I just go g5 right away. By the way, this has also been played by Judith Polgar, Karpov, Kasparov has played this. This is called the Keres attack. I recommend that you study this opening very well. So h takes g5 is what most of them play. We take back with the bishop, and after knight c6, we just simply play queen d2, planning to castle long next. Queen b6 may be played, posing a double threat on the knight and the pawn on b2. And so here I just recommend you go knight b3, and after knight e5, by the way, this is all theory, there's nothing new here, and this is what I recommend that you guys be playing. Black wants to give a check on f3 and also winning your queen, so just play bishop e2, stopping this idea. And after bishop e7 by black preparing to castle short, here he just castle long. I mean, where is black even going to castle? You have already destroyed the king side. I mean, if they castle short, we have the open g-file for our queen's rook, and this h-pawn will match up to the h6 square. Things will turn sour. We are going to be celebrating. And if black thinks he can take our free pawn on f2, well, it's game over after bishop b5 check with a discovery on the black queen. So this is what I recommend you should be playing against the Sicilian defense, especially in classical matches. Even in your blitz games, I mean, it's not much of a stretch. And then there's a way I like forcing my opponents to play pawn to e6 right away, e.g. after e4, c5 the Sicilian defense or normal stuff, d6, d4, pawn takes, knight takes, attacking my e4 pawn. I don't go knight c3, I just simply play bishop c4. This is what I play to force an early pawn to e6 right away. If you don't know what happens after black takes our free pawn on e4, I recommend that you watch this video that has popped up in the card above, so I can guarantee you most of your prepared opponents won't take on e4, they'll play pawn to e6, just covering the f7 pawn. Now our pawn on e4 is surely under attack, so we must develop the knight. And whenever I see pawn to s6, I go bishop b3. If b5, well, that is too late. I can simply play pawn to a3, stopping b4 next because my e4 pawn was going to be hanging. So bishop e7, preparing to castle shot. That's what black does. And after I ensure that there are no threats that can come to my queen side, and also that my e4 pawn is well defended, that's when I play pawn to g4 with the same ideas of the carrier's attack. Because if bishop b7, indirectly attacking my rook on h1, queen e2 is even better. And if h6, stopping pawn to g5, well, the truth is I can still go pawn to g5 with the same idea of opening up the g file and castling long. But there's even a common trap that I wanted to show you guys in this line, where you can actually take on e6, because the logic is that after pawn takes, we take back with a knight attacking the queen, and after something like queen d7, we take another pawn. So we've actually taken 3 of black's pawns for a bishop, which is suffice to win the game. In fact, 3 pawns equals 1 minor piece, theoretically speaking. The ideas are very simple. We'll play pawn to f3, bishop f4, castle long. We also have knight takes on h6 if black goes rook g8. So this is some master level stuff, and I'm showing you all this to appreciate how wonderful you guys have been, and also for subscribing to my channel, and also for buying my courses. Anyway, so these are some of the lines that you should keep in mind whenever you're playing your OTB games and tournaments. Anyways, let's look at how to respond against the French defense. Alright, so we just started with pawn to e4, expecting black to play e5, and then they play pawn to e6, which is the French defense. So let me tell you something with the French. Black knows exactly what he is doing. People who play openings like the French defense and the Caro-Kann defense, they know their theories very well. They've studied some course somewhere, they know a number of lines, they know what to do against the exchange variation. They have some special prep against pawn to e5, and that's why after e6, d4, d5, instead of going pawn to e5, I just recommend that you go with a percent variation, which is knight c3. Knight d2 is also playable. That is the Tarrasch variation, and it's also worth researching on. But what I recommend here is simply knight c3. I like this move. It's just simple, and it makes most of your French opponents to run out of ideas very quickly. I mean, the first 3 moves that most French players study are e6, d5, c5. Now, after seeing knight c3, the options have now increased, and so they're out of their preparation. Should they play knight f6, bishop b4, or c5? Or simply taking on e4, they don't know. So if they play bishop b4, now here's why I recommend that you go pawn to e5. And seeing this, you're going to see them playing pawn to c5 immediately. That's what they wanted to play at first anyways. And right here, since the bishop is already out, that's when we are supposed to play pawn to a3. By the way, pawn to a3 forces black to give up his bishop right away, because there's no good reason for black to retreat his bishop to a5 according to theory. Anyways, clearly you can see that these pawns are coming, and there's a problem on e7 because the knight is pinned to the queen, and we're also threatening to take the bishop on c7, which is why it is not really a good idea, theoretically speaking, to go bishop f5. Therefore, you're going to see black taking on c3, after which you take with your b pawn. By the way, if c takes d4, we'll take back with our pawn and still have 3 connected pawns on the center. So black may try to do something else like knight e7, And here, even though we have plenty of options to play, such as queen g4, knight f3, bishop d3, I just suggest that you become aggressive and go with h4, because next you want to go h5, and if black allows, we are going to play h6 and bishop g5, plant our bishop on f6. Life is good all the time, and so black should maybe play pawn to h6. And again, we have plenty of options to play. Our game is very flexible. We can go rook b1, intending to plant our rook on b3. Bishop d3 will come at some point, provided that we do not allow this fork coming. We are going to play knight f3 and castle short. And at any point, if black plays pawn to f5, we are going to take with n%, because we don't want to allow black's pawn to sit on f5 forever. So that's just how to play against the French defense. Very simple stuff. And going back, instead of bishop b4 pinning our knight, black may play something like knight f6. Again, we just go e5. Knight e7 is what they play. We know that black wants to play c5 next. Take our d4 pawn and probably take our e5 pawn in the near future. So we just play pawn to f4, holding on to our e5 pawn, so that even if c5 comes, we don't even get worried. We just develop normally and ensure that we don't have any weakness. Knight f4 attacks the queen, plus defending our pawn on b2. If queen f5 check, we play c3. Our knight is still defended by our queen, and we're also planning to take on c5, for example, if b5. But if c takes d4, this is the only crucial moment to remember. Just don't take on d4 immediately, as your end knight doesn't have better squares to go to. So better play an in-between move, pawn to b4, attacking black's queen, which forces the queen to go back, and only then do we take on d4 with the knight. And after knight takes d4, we take back with our bishop. Again, look at the position. We have stabilized everything. We have no weaknesses. We can play a3, rook c1, castle short, bishop d3. Life is good all the time, and all the time life is good. So that was in the knight f6 variation. Let's go back. Instead of these two moves, if black decides to take on e4, for example, d takes e4, well, here we just be simple, take the pawn. If knight f6, we take the knight. And here theory says black should take with his g-pawn, accepting to damage his pawn structure. But that's not what you're going to see your opponents playing. They are going to take with the queen, which is very bad according to Stockfish, because now we are going to take advantage of this queen which is developed so early in the opening. Play bishop d3, and if bishop d6, we play queen e2, preparing to go queen e4. By the way, queen e2 before castling short is very important, because it poses a threat of checkmating on h7 right away. And in this position, the only move to play is g6, because if queen g6, we take the queen, and here we are just up a pawn, plus having emerged with a better pawn structure and a better position. Even if black doesn't exchange queens, g6 is equally bad, because we can simply take the pawn on h6, attacking the rook on f8. And we have a very decent game from here. So that's what happens if black chooses to play d takes e4 right away. So clearly this is not good for black. So that's why instead of taking on e4, you're going to see pawn to c5, keeping everything in the spirit of the French. But this should be the simplest of all, because we're just going to take all these pawns with our pawns to simplify the game even further. And that's not what French players like. They like closed games on the center. So for example, take on d5 first, e takes d5, we give a check with our bishop, the knight blocks, d takes c5, and now you can see that we are putting more pressure on the d5 pawn. If d4, attacking our knight, we first of all give black a check on e2. If queen e7, we have knight e4, intending to go knight d6 check next, which is why you see them playing bishop e6, blocking the check. So we just go knight f4, defending our pawn which was being attacked by the bishop. And here there's nothing that black can do. For example, s6 is by far the most played move. We just take the knight, and after b takes, we play bishop d2, cause black wanted to give a check on f5 and win the knight. So knight f6 by black, knight f3, no more development stuff, bishop e7, castle short, and then we play rook fe1. Are we not having a normal game from here? I mean, the next move we play is b4, pawn to a3. We also have knight b6 coming. What else do you want? Anyway, so this is what happens after pawn to c5 in the Poisson variation. Okay, so let's look at the last one against the Caro-Kann defense. Again, you play pawn to e4, expecting black to play e5, and then they play pawn to c6, which is the Caro-Kann defense. By the way, I have a full course on the Caro-Kann defense, how to play the Caro-Kann defense with black pieces. I love this opening. It's something that I would recommend for beginners to learn. It's a non-committal opening, and I've seen great results from my students, so I'm really proud of this course. Anyways, so we still go pawn to d4, cause why not? So d5 by black. Now just like in a French defense, again, Caro-Kann players are well prepared. They know their opening. They've already started their Caro-Kann course, which they bought from Casper or from any other chess coach, international master, grandmaster, etc. So they are well prepared with moves such as pawn to e5 and pawn takes. So here I just recommend that you play the move knight c3. This is something that most Caro-Kann players don't really pay much attention to when studying their courses. This is simply called the classical variation. The most played move is d takes e4, after which I recommend you take back with your knight, and bishop f5 is what you're going to see, which is officially the classical variation. And here I just want you to be very simple. Just play knight g3 attacking the bishop. Moves are well known. h4 preparing to go h5. They play h6. This is all theory. And here you go knight f3. Knight e7 is what they play, probably stopping your knight e5 ideas. Bishop d3, you exchange bishops, and then they play e6. And so you just play bishop f4, queen f5 checks c3. This is the simplest of all. So this is just a line that I would recommend that you guys should be playing. Look at how well developed your pieces are. You are ahead in development, unlike black. So you should be good to go with this opening. And going back, after pawn to d4, d5, knight c3, pawn takes and knight takes, you're going to see some of your opponents playing knight f6. This is called the Tartakov variation, or simply the main line inviting the Tartakov variation. Here I recommend that you just take the knight, and after e takes f6, your plan is very simple. Just develop your bishops on these squares, and the other thing that you need to remember is not to develop your knight on f3 if you want to avoid some unnecessary traps. So you develop your king's knight to e2. For example, bishop e3, bishop d6, bishop d3, castle shot, and then you develop your knight to e2 instead of f3. This, I can promise you, will save you more time, because the next move that you're going to play is castle shot, and whatever black plays, by the way, black wants to sit on f8 with this knight, so just go c4. All your minor pieces are developed, so just make sure you are ahead even with pawns. Knight f8, you play queen c2, and the ideas are very simple. Pawn to c5 will come later on. Pawn to h3, very important, although you should look out for this bishop queen battery along this diagonal. The king's rook will sit on e1, the queen's rook will sit on d1 in most cases. a3, b4, and h3 will come later on. So these are the plans to follow. I don't know if it's very difficult to play against the Caro-Kann defense when you start with knight to c3. Anyways, so this is just my e4 bundle intro. You haven't seen anything. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website. The link is in the description down below, where you can purchase all my courses at very affordable prices. And hey, you can also join me on Patreon. The link for my Patreon page is also in the description down below, where I post exclusive content and other premium videos that I make specifically for my students. There you also have access to my other articles, well annotated master PGNs, and my other corporate things outside the chess world. For example, you will find the link for this PGN on my Patreon page, so feel free to join my page, and remember to subscribe to my channel on YouTube. Hit the like button, share this video, leave your comments in the comment section down below, because I do read all of them, and spread the love. So thank you for watching.